Chapter 1. Every art, inquiry, action, and pursuit aims at some good. This is why the good is seen as what all things aim for. However, there are differences among ends. Some are activities, while others are products separate from the activities that create them. Products are often better than the activities that produce them. Since there are many actions, arts, and sciences, their ends are also varied. For example, the medical art aims at health, shipbuilding at a vessel, strategy at victory, and economics at wealth. When arts are part of a larger capacity, like horse equipment under riding or military actions under strategy, the ends of the master arts are more important than the subordinate ones. The subordinate ends are pursued for the sake of the master ends. It doesn't matter if the activities themselves are the ends or if something else is, as in the sciences mentioned. Chapter 2. If there's a goal we pursue for its own sake, and not everything for something else, it must be the good and the main good. Knowing this would greatly impact our lives, making us more likely to do what's right, like archers aiming at a target. So, we should try to figure out what this good is and which science or skill it relates to. It seems to belong to the most respected and masterful art, which is politics. Politics decides which sciences to study in a state and what each citizen should learn. Even the most valued skills, like strategy, economics, and rhetoric, fall under politics. Since politics uses other sciences and tells us what to do and avoid, its goal must include those of others, making it the good for humans. Although the goal might be the same for an individual and a state, achieving it for a state seems greater and more complete. It's worthwhile to reach the goal for one person, but it's more noble and godlike to do so for a nation or city-states. These are the goals our study seeks, as it is political science. Chapter 3. Our discussion should be clear as the subject allows, because precision isn't needed in every topic, just like in every craft. Political science looks at fine and just actions, which can vary greatly and are often seen as existing only by agreement, not by nature. Goods also cause disagreement because they can harm many people. Wealth has ruined some and courage others. So when talking about these subjects, we should aim to show the truth roughly. Similarly, conclusions should be accepted as mostly true. An educated person seeks precision only where the subject allows it, and it's silly to expect probable reasoning from a mathematician or scientific proofs from a rhetorician. People are good at judging things they know well, so if someone is trained in a topic, they can judge it accurately. And if someone has a broad education, they can judge things generally. That's why young people aren't the best listeners for political science lectures. They haven't experienced the real-life actions these discussions are based on. Plus, they often follow their emotions, making their study pointless because the goal is action, not just knowledge. It doesn't matter if they're young in age or just in character. The problem is how they live and chase their desires. For these people, like those who can't control themselves, knowledge doesn't help. But for those who want and act rationally, knowledge is very useful. These comments about the student, what kind of treatment they might receive, and the goal of the inquiry can be seen as our introduction. Chapter 4. Let's continue our search and find out what political science aims for, and what the greatest good we can achieve through action is. Most people agree that happiness is the goal, and they equate living well and doing well with being happy. However, they disagree on what happiness truly is. Many see it as simple things like pleasure, wealth, or honor, but even they can't agree on one definition. For example, someone might think happiness is health when they're sick or wealth when they're poor. Aware of their lack of understanding, they admire those who speak of great ideals beyond their grasp. Some believe there is another good that stands on its own and makes all other goods good. While exploring every opinion might not be useful, it's enough to look at the most common or debatable ones. It's important to note the difference between arguments that start from first principles and those that end there. Plato was right to ask this question, as he often did: are we moving from or to the first principles? This is like the difference between the path from the judges to the turning point in a race and the way back. We must start with what we know, but things can be known in two ways. Some are known to us, and some are known universally. So we should begin with what we personally know. Therefore, anyone who wants to understand lectures on nobility, justice, and political science must have been raised in good habits. The fact is our starting point, and if it's clear to him, he won't need reasons at first. A well-raised person has or can easily find starting points, but for someone who doesn't have or can't find them, let him listen to Hesiod's words. The best person is one who understands everything on their own. A good person listens to advice when it's correct, but someone who doesn't know anything and doesn't value others' wisdom is useless. Chapter 5. Let's get back to our conversation where we left off. Looking at how people live, most, especially those of a lowly nature, seem to think that good or happiness is the same as pleasure. That's why they enjoy a life of fun. There are three main types of life: the one we just mentioned, the political life, and the contemplative life. Most people have simple tastes, liking a life that suits animals, but they have some reason for this view because many leaders share the tastes of Sardanapalus. When we look at these main types of life, we see that refined and active people think happiness is about honor. This is, in general, the goal of the political life, but it seems too shallow to be what we're really looking for, since it depends on those who give honor rather than on the person who receives it. The good we think is something truly belonging to a person and not easily taken away. Also, people seem to seek honor to be sure of their goodness. At least practical people look for honor from those who know them and based on their virtue. So, according to them, virtue is better. Maybe we should think that virtue, rather than honor, is the true goal of the political life. But even this seems a bit incomplete. Having virtue can go along with being asleep, inactive for life, or experiencing great suffering and misfortune. A person living like this wouldn't be called happy unless they were trying to prove a point. But that's enough about this. The topic has been discussed enough in current conversations. Lastly, we'll look at the contemplative life. Making money is something we do because we have to, and wealth isn't really what we're after. It's just helpful for other things. So, we might think the things mentioned earlier are the real goals because we love them for their own sake. But it's clear that even these aren't the ultimate goals, even though many arguments have been made to support them. Let's move on from this topic. Chapter 6. We should probably think about what's best for everyone and talk a lot about what that means. This is tough because some of our friends have introduced the forms, which complicate things. But it might be seen as our duty to keep the truth, even if it means breaking down what's close to us. Especially since we're philosophers or seekers of wisdom. Both are important, but we must value truth more than our friends. The men who introduced this idea didn't think of good as a class with a clear order. Instead, good is used in different ways, as a thing, a quality, and a relationship. Substance, which is the basic form of a thing, is naturally more important than relationships, so there can't be a single idea of good that covers all these uses. Also, good has as many meanings as being, so it can't be something that is always present and the same in every situation. If it were, it would only be used in one category, not all. Furthermore, if all things that share an idea belong to one science, then there would be one science for all goods. But in reality, there are many sciences, even for things in one category like opportunity. Opportunity in war is studied by strategics and in illness by medicine. Similarly, moderation in food is studied by medicine and in exercise by gymnastics. One might wonder what they mean by a thing itself. For example, the description of man himself is the same for all men. As long as they are men, they don't differ in any way. If this is true, then good itself and specific goods should also be the same in their goodness. However, being eternal doesn't make something better, just like something that lasts a long time isn't any whiter than something that disappears in a day. The Pythagoreans seem to have a more convincing idea of good, by including the one in their list of goods, and Speusippus appears to have followed their approach. Let's talk about this somewhere else. However, there's a point to be made. The Platonists haven't covered all kinds of goods. They say that goods we love for themselves are linked to one form, while those that help create or keep these goods or stop their opposites are linked to them in a secondary way. So clearly, goods need to be discussed in two ways. Some are good by themselves and others are good because of them. Let's separate goods that are good by themselves from those that are useful and see if the former are linked to a single idea. What kinds of goods are good by themselves? Are they things we chase even when they're alone, like intelligence, sight, and certain pleasures and honors? Yes, if we also seek these for other reasons, they would still be considered good by themselves. Or is only the idea of good good by itself? If that's the case, the form would be empty. But if the things we mentioned are also good by themselves, then the explanation of the good must be the same in all of them, like how whiteness is the same in snow and white lead. However, when it comes to honor, wisdom, and pleasure, their goodness is explained differently. Therefore, the good isn't a common element that fits one idea. What do we mean by the good? It's not just something that happens to have the same name. Are goods all connected to one main good, or do they relate to each other in a similar way? For example, sight is important for the body, and reason is important for the soul, and so on with other things. But maybe we should set these topics aside for now. Understanding them perfectly would be better for another type of philosophy. The same goes for the idea. Even if there's one main good that can be said about all goods or exists on its own, humans can't reach or achieve it. We're looking for something we can actually get. However, some people might find it useful to know about this main good to better understand the goods we can achieve. Having this as a guide, we can learn more about what's good for us, and if we know, we can achieve it. This idea makes sense, but it seems to go against how the sciences work. Even though they aim for some good and try to fill in what's missing, they don't focus on knowing the good itself. But it's unlikely that all skilled workers would ignore such a helpful idea. It's also hard to imagine how a weaver or a carpenter would improve their craft by knowing this good itself, or how someone who has seen the idea would become a better doctor or general. Doctors don't seem to study health in this way, but the health of people, or maybe just one person, they heal individuals. But let's move on from these topics. Chapter 7. Let's think about what we're looking for that's good. It seems different in various actions and skills. It's different in medicine, strategy, and other skills too. So what's the good in each? It's what everything else is done for. In medicine, it's health. In strategy, it's victory. In architecture, it's a house. In other areas, it's something else. And in every action and goal, it's the end. This is why people do whatever they do. If there's a final goal for everything we do, this will be the good we can achieve through action. And if there are more than one, these will be the goods we can achieve through action. The argument has come to the same conclusion through a different path, but we need to explain it more clearly. There are clearly more than one goal, and we choose some of these goals for the sake of others. So, not all goals are ultimate goals, but the main good is definitely an ultimate goal. Therefore, if there is only one ultimate goal, that's what we're looking for, and if there are more than one, the most ultimate of these is what we're looking for. We call something that is worth pursuing on its own more ultimate than something worth pursuing for another reason. We also call something that is never desirable for another reason more ultimate than things that are desirable both on their own and for another reason. So, we call an ultimate goal something that is always desirable on its own and never for another reason. Happiness is the most important thing we seek. We always choose it for ourselves, never for something else. While we value honor, pleasure, reason, and virtues for their own sake, we also choose them because we believe they lead to happiness. However, no one chooses happiness for the sake of these things or for anything else. When it comes to being self-sufficient, the end goal is seen as something that stands on its own. By self-sufficient, we mean not just enough for someone living alone, but also for their family, friends, and community, as people are meant to live together. However, we can't keep adding everyone, like ancestors and distant friends, because that would lead to an endless list. Let's look at this another time. For now, we define self-sufficient as something that, when alone, makes life enjoyable and complete. We believe this is what happiness is, and it's the most valuable thing of all. If happiness were just one of many goods, adding even a small extra would make it more appealing because more is always better. So, happiness is final, self-sufficient, and the ultimate goal of our actions. To say that happiness is the main good might seem obvious, and people still want a clearer understanding of it. This could be possible if we first find out what humans are meant to do. Just like a flute player, a sculptor, or an artist whose goodness is found in their work, humans might have a similar purpose. Do carpenters and tanners have specific jobs, and does man have none? Is he born without a purpose? Or like the eye, hand, and foot, which each have a job, does man have a unique job beyond these? What could it be? Life is shared by plants, but we're looking for what makes humans special. Let's ignore the life of eating and growing. Then there's a life of sensing, but animals like horses and oxen also have this. So there's a life of active thinking, which is what we mean by life of the rational element. This has two parts. One follows orders and the other thinks and makes decisions. If human purpose is an activity of the soul that involves thinking, and if we say that being good at something means doing it well, then human goodness is doing soul activities well, especially those that involve thinking. If a good person does these activities nobly and well, then human good is doing soul activities in line with virtue. And if there are many virtues, doing them in the best and most complete way. We need to say in a full life. Just one swallow doesn't create a summer, nor does one day. Similarly, one day or a brief period doesn't make a person blessed and happy. Let's start by outlining what is good. We should first sketch it roughly and then add details later. Anyone can continue and explain a well-outlined idea, and time helps in this work, just like it has led to progress in the arts. People can fill in what is missing. We should also remember past discussions and not expect the same level of precision in everything. Precision should match the subject and the inquiry. For example, a carpenter and a geometer study the right angle differently. The carpenter focuses on how it is useful for his work, while the geometer wants to understand what it is as he is seeking the truth. We should approach other matters similarly, so our main goal isn't overshadowed by smaller questions. We don't need to know the cause in every case. Sometimes, it's enough to have a well-established fact, like with first principles, where the fact is the main thing. We discover first principles in different ways, through observation, understanding, or practice. But we should investigate each set naturally and clearly state them, as they greatly influence what comes next. The beginning is believed to be more than half of the whole, and many questions are answered by it. Chapter 8. We need to think about this topic not just based on our conclusions and starting points, but also on what people usually say about it. When we have a correct understanding, all the information fits together, but if we're wrong, the facts quickly contradict each other. Goods are often split into three groups. Some are external, others relate to the soul or body, and we consider those related to the soul as the true goods. Psychical actions and activities are linked to the soul. So our explanation should be solid, especially according to this long-standing and widely accepted view among philosophers. It's also accurate because we connect the end goal with certain actions and activities, placing it among the goods of the soul rather than external goods. Another belief that aligns with our explanation is that a happy person lives well and does well. We've practically defined happiness as a good life and good actions. The traits associated with happiness seem to match what we've defined it as. Some people equate happiness with virtue, others with practical wisdom, and some with philosophically wisdom. Some include pleasure, while others add external prosperity. Many of these views have been held by people throughout history, and it's unlikely that they are completely wrong. Instead, they probably hold some truth, or even most of it. Our ideas agree with those who see happiness as linked to virtue or one specific virtue, because virtue involves doing virtuous things. However, it matters a lot whether we consider the greatest good to be having something or using it, feeling a certain way or being active. A state of mind can exist without leading to any good outcome, like when someone is asleep or completely inactive, but activity cannot. If someone is active, they must be doing something and doing it well. Just like in the Olympic Games, where the most beautiful and strongest aren't rewarded but those who compete are, those who act earn and deserve the noble and good things in life. Their life is naturally enjoyable. Pleasure is a feeling in the soul, and what each person loves is pleasant to them. For example, a horse is pleasant to someone who loves horses, a show is pleasant to someone who loves sights, and just actions are pleasant to someone who loves justice. In general, virtuous actions are pleasant to those who love virtue. Most people have pleasures that clash because these aren't naturally pleasant. However, those who love noble things find pleasure in what is naturally pleasant, and virtuous actions are such. Therefore, these actions are pleasant for these people and in their own right. Their life doesn't need extra pleasure as a kind of charm. It has its own pleasure. Besides what we've said, a person who doesn't enjoy noble actions isn't even good. No one would call a person just if they didn't enjoy being just, or liberal if they didn't enjoy being liberal, and the same goes for all other virtues. If this is true, virtuous actions must be naturally pleasant, but they are also good and noble and have these qualities to the highest degree because a good person judges well about them. Happiness is then the best, noblest, and most pleasant thing in the world, and these qualities are not separate, unlike in the saying at Delos. The most noble thing is justice, the best is health, but the most enjoyable is achieving what we love. All these qualities are part of the best actions, and we see these, or the best of them, as happiness. Happiness also needs things from the outside world like friends, money, and political power. These help us do good things. Without them, happiness might not shine as brightly. For example, being well-born, having beautiful children, or being attractive can make a big difference. Someone who is very ugly, poorly born, or alone without children might not be very happy. And if they have bad children or friends, or lose good ones, they might be even less likely to be happy. So, happiness seems to need some kind of success too. That's why some people think happiness is the same as good luck, while others believe it's about being virtuous. Chapter 9. People often wonder if happiness can be gained through learning, habit, or some other kind of training, or if it comes from divine luck or chance. If the gods give any gifts to humans, it makes sense that happiness should be one of them, especially since it's the best. However, this question might fit better in a different discussion. Even if happiness isn't directly from the gods, but results from virtue and learning or training, it still seems very godlike. The reward and goal of virtue appear to be the best thing in the world, something godlike and blessed. This idea will be widely accepted because anyone who isn't naturally limited in their ability to be virtuous can achieve it through a specific type of study and attention. If it's better to be happy through effort than by luck, it makes sense that things should be this way. Nature makes everything as good as it can naturally, and similarly, art or any rational cause makes things as good as they can be, especially if it's the best cause. Leaving the most important and noble things to chance would be a very flawed system. The answer to our question is clear from the definition of happiness. It's been described as a virtuous activity of the soul in a specific way. Among the other good things, some must exist beforehand as conditions for happiness, while others naturally help and are useful as tools. This matches what we said at the beginning. The goal of political science is the best goal, and it focuses mainly on shaping citizens to be good and capable of noble actions. So we don't say oxen, horses, or other animals are happy because they can't do the things that make us happy. A boy isn't happy either because he's too young to do these things, and when we call boys happy, it's because we hope they will be in the future. As we mentioned, being happy requires not just perfect virtue but also a full life. Life is full of changes and chances, and even the most successful people can face big problems when they get old, like Priam in the Trojan stories. If someone has faced these changes and ended up unhappy, we don't call them happy. Chapter 10. So can anyone be called happy while they're still alive, or do we have to wait until the end, as Solon suggests? Even if we accept this idea, does it mean a person is happy when they're dead? That seems quite strange, especially since we believe happiness is something you do. But if we don't call the dead happy, and Solon doesn't mean that either, then maybe we can say a person is blessed because they're finally free from bad things and misfortunes. This raises another question because both good and bad are thought to affect the dead, just like they do someone who's alive but doesn't know about them. For example, honors and dishonors, and the good or bad luck of their children and other descendants. This also creates a problem because even if someone has lived happily until they're old and died in a way that matches their life, their descendants might face many ups and downs. Some might have good lives and achieve what they deserve, while others might not. Clearly, the closeness of their relationship to their ancestors can vary a lot. So, it would be strange if the dead person were to change with these events and be happy at one time and miserable at another. It would also be strange if the descendants' fortunes didn't affect the happiness of their ancestors for a while. We need to go back to our first problem because maybe thinking about it will help us solve our current one. If we have to see the end of a person's life to call them happy, not because they are happy now but because they were happy before, that's strange. When someone is happy, we shouldn't say they are truly happy because we don't want to call living people happy due to the changes they might face. We think happiness is something lasting and not easily changed, while a person can experience many ups and downs. If we followed their luck, we'd often call the same person happy and then unhappy, making happiness seem like a changing color and not stable. Or is that wrong? Life's success or failure doesn't depend on these changes, but human life needs them as extras. What really makes a person happy or unhappy are their virtuous actions or the lack of them. The question we've talked about supports our definition. No human activity lasts as long as doing good things, and the most important ones are even more lasting because happy people enjoy and focus on these activities throughout their lives. This is why we remember them. So, the quality we're discussing belongs to a happy person who will remain happy all their life. They will always, or at least most of the time, be involved in good actions and thinking, and they will handle life's ups and downs with dignity and grace if they are truly good and beyond reproach. Many things happen by chance, and they can be different in importance. Small bits of luck or bad luck don't really change life much. But if a lot of big events go well, life becomes happier. If they go badly, they can destroy happiness because they bring pain and stop many activities. Still, even in these tough times, a person's nobility can shine through when they face many great misfortunes with calm acceptance, not because they don't feel pain, but because of their noble and strong spirit. If activities shape our lives, a truly happy person can't become miserable because they won't do hateful or mean things. A good and wise person handles life's challenges well and always makes the best of situations, just like a skilled general uses his army effectively or a talented shoemaker creates the best shoes from the materials he has. This applies to all craftsmen. Therefore, a happy person can't become miserable, but they won't achieve blessedness if they face extreme hardships like those of Priam. He isn't colorful and changeable. He won't easily leave his happy state because of small problems, but only because of many big ones. And if he has faced many big problems, he won't quickly regain his happiness. If he does, it will take a long time and involve many great achievements. So when should we say someone is happy? It's when they live a full life according to complete virtue and have enough external goods, not just for a short time but always. Or should we say, and who is meant to live and die like this? The future is uncertain, but happiness is a final goal. Therefore, we will call happy those living people who meet these conditions now and will continue to do so. That's the end of these discussions. Chapter 11. The idea that the happiness of a person shouldn't be affected by the good or bad luck of their descendants and friends might seem unfriendly and goes against common beliefs. However, since many different events can happen, and some are more important to us than others, it would be impossible to discuss each one in detail. So, let's look at the general picture. Just like some of our own problems have a big impact on life while others are less serious, the problems of our friends also vary. It matters whether these problems happen to the living or the dead, and we should consider this too. There's also a question about whether the dead experience any good or evil. From these thoughts, it seems that even if something good or bad reaches them, it must be very weak and not important, either by itself or for them. If it were important, it wouldn't make the unhappy happy or take away the happiness of those who are already happy. So, while the good or bad luck of friends might have some effects on the dead, these effects are so small and specific that they don't change the happiness of the living or the blessedness of the happy. Chapter 12. Now that we've clearly answered these questions, let's think about whether happiness is something we praise or something we value. It's definitely not something we just hope for. We praise things because they are a certain type and connected to something else. For example, we praise a just or brave person because of their actions and roles, and we praise a strong person or a good runner because they are linked to something important and good. This is also true when we praise the gods. It seems strange to compare them to us, but we do because praise involves a connection to something else. However, if praise is for things like we've mentioned, then what we do for the best things is not just praise, but something greater and better. We call the gods and the most godlike people blessed and happy. The same goes for good things. We don't praise happiness like we do justice, but we call it blessed because it's more divine and better. Eudoxus was likely correct in his approach of valuing pleasure above all else. He believed that since pleasure is a good but not often praised, it must be superior to the things that are praised. This, he thought, is what God and the good are, as everything else is judged by them. Praise is fitting for virtue because it leads people to perform noble actions. However, honors are given to specific deeds, whether physical or mental. It might be more fitting for experts in honors to discuss these details, but from what we've heard, happiness is among the things we value and consider perfect. This is also true because happiness is a fundamental principle. We do everything for the sake of happiness. We argue that the first principle and cause of good things is something valued and divine. Chapter 13. Happiness is something the soul does when it's perfectly virtuous. So, to understand happiness better, we need to look at what virtue is. People who study politics are believed to focus on virtue because they want to make their fellow citizens good and law-abiding. We can see this in the lawgivers of Crete and Sparta and others like them. If this study is part of political science, then it fits with our original goal. But we need to study human virtue because we're looking for human good and happiness. By human virtue, we mean qualities of the soul, not the body, and happiness is also an activity of the soul. If this is true, then political students must understand the soul, just like doctors need to know about the body to heal it. Politics is more important than medicine, so political students should study the soul enough to answer the questions we're asking. We don't need to get too detailed because that might be more work than we need. There are some things already talked about, even outside our school, and we need to use these ideas. For example, it's said that one part of the soul is irrational and another has a rational principle. Whether these parts are separate like body parts or distinct by definition but naturally inseparable like the sides of a circle, doesn't matter for this question. One part of the irrational element is spread out and related to plants, meaning it helps with nutrition and growth. This soul power is needed for all babies, embryos, and fully grown animals. It's more logical to think they all have the same power rather than different ones. This power seems to be common to all species, not just humans. It works mostly during sleep, when goodness and badness are least obvious, unless some movements reach the soul. In that case, the dreams of good people might be better than those of average people. Let's move on from this topic, as the nutritive power doesn't contribute to human excellence. There's another irrational part in the soul that somehow connects to a rational idea. We admire the rational part of both the self-controlled person and the uncontrolled one, because it guides them towards good things. But they also have another part that naturally opposes this rational guidance, fighting against it. Just like paralyzed limbs move in the wrong direction when we try to control them, the same happens with the soul. The urges of uncontrolled people go the opposite way. While we can see the body moving wrongly, we can't see the soul doing so. Still, we must believe that there's something in the soul that opposes the rational guidance. This doesn't matter much, but even this part seems to have a bit of rationality. In the self-controlled person, it follows the rational guidance, and probably in the temperate and brave person, it follows it even more closely. In them, it speaks with the same voice as the rational part. So the irrational part seems to have two sides. The vegetative part doesn't follow any rational rules, but the appetitive and generally the desiring part do in a way. This happens when it pays attention to and follows rational guidance, like considering what your father or friends would say. We don't mean this in the sense of explaining a math problem. The irrational part can be influenced by rational ideas, as shown by giving advice, correcting mistakes, and encouraging others. If we say this irrational part also has a rational principle, then something with a rational principle will be twofold. One part will have it strictly and on its own, and the other will have a tendency to follow, similar to how one obeys their father. Virtue is also divided into types based on this difference. We say that some virtues are related to the mind and others to behavior. Philosophically, wisdom, understanding, and practical wisdom are intellectual virtues, while liberality and temperance are moral virtues. When we talk about a person's character, we don't say they are wise or have understanding, but that they are good-tempered or temperate. However, we also praise the wise person for their mindset, and we call those mindsets that deserve praise virtues.